I'd like to start with one question to all of you in turn. Quick question. If you can reach into your lives, your backgrounds, your communities, and give me examples of dignity supplied and dignity denied coming out of the faith communities you live and work around. Somewhere where an action inspired and somewhere where it was quite tragic in the way it dealt with people with HIV/AIDS. Yvette, can I start with you? So, African American community, San Francisco, 2 examples.
Well, the community that comes up most for me when I think about the question of dignity denied and dignity supplied would be the transgender community within the African American faith community. The reality of the transgender community and the larger conversation of gender and what that really does, how that manifests in the African American faith community is most evident when we are seeking to do ministry with trans people. Trans people of color and trans people who are African American specific are, in my thinking, denied dignity more than any other community that we serve. It has everything to do with the misunderstandings of binary constructs. Essentially, men are not from Mars, women are not from Venus. That's a huge mistake. And also the idea that trans people who are in fact and indeed transgender are, in many people's thinking, people who simply are transgressors, folks who are playing at being other than their birth gender. So it's a huge misunderstanding, a massive misunderstanding, and a huge oppression, which leads to this community having the highest cases of incidence and prevalence around HIV and being in many ways disenfranchised from church and faith, even by churches that are welcoming of gay people.
And we'll unpack that more a little later, but just reach into your experience and a real example of the other part of the spectrum, where out of a faith-inspired individual has come dignity supplied.
What we call in the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries radical inclusivity, extravagant grace, and relentless hospitality suggests that all persons should be welcome at the table of God. And the idea that the role of the church is to exclude, to take seats away from the table, has been a misunderstanding of religion for a long time. I don't know where we got that notion. Our job is to find ways to get as many chairs to the table as we possibly can. And in doing that, we must be radically inclusive of the transgender community.
Amen to that. I want to move on quickly and staying in the Abrahamic faiths, but moving to Islam. Fagmeda, 2 brief personal examples you can put your finger on of dignity denied first, coming out of Islam, maybe something you experienced, and then dignity supplied because of religion.
Well, I must say, when I first disclosed my own HIV status as a Muslim person living with HIV, my religious leaders told me boldly that, first of all, AIDS does not exist in Islam. And secondly, I must have, been a loose woman getting HIV. And I sat back thinking, okay, so where did other people get HIV from? It's only when I disclosed to them that, I was married when I contracted HIV. And then my religious leader said, oh, well, then it's fine to support you. But for me, it was like, so what about the innocent people that contracted HIV? And that is why I have decided, it's better for me to speak openly about HIV. And today, I can say my religious leaders are 100% behind me. But before that, I really had a long battle fighting with them because they did not want me to speak about it. They said, it's okay if you have HIV, but please don't talk about it because it doesn't happen to us. But for me, I would honestly say that, I realized that all religions are the same. When I did some research, I realized it's not just Islam that did this to me. When I went to other faiths, they had the same story, the same belief. Because you are a religious person, you cannot contract HIV. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
And just reach into your experience and pick out an example where out of Islam, people inspired have been positive either towards you or others living with HIV.
I think a positive side that came out of this was I started a Muslim support group for people living with HIV. And the group itself is now over 12 years old. And in that group, we have found that many Muslim people have lost relatives to HIV, but they had no platform, they had nowhere to go. So when I came out, for them it was really like an eye-opener, because they could not speak openly about it. And again, for them it was like, because religion says only a certain group of people contract HIV. So if you are like Islamically inclined, then you cannot have HIV. But for me, I'm just a normal person that's living with HIV. I'm not a theologian or anything. I just practice my Islam. And for, that's it, yeah.
Thank
I'm
you.
a bit shy.
Thank you. Moving along. Swamiji, if you could enlighten us out of your Hindu perspective. Whoops, there we go. We're all standing. The Hindu perspective. Again, an example where out of Hinduism uniquely has some problem emerged for you and for people with HIV, and somewhere you've drawn strength from Hinduism.
Not very far away in time, in the Reunion there was a Kavadi festival. Kavadi is a very big festival in the Reunion. So usually I was invited to speak during this festival to the public, to make all people chant mantras and give a very good spiritual vibration in the temple. But since two years back, I declared my being HIV positive to the public. So all the doors of the temple closed. And even recently, last May, I was not invited to one temple where I used to go. And I understood why. So I went to the temple, but I stayed outside. Some people asked me to come inside. I said, no, I cannot come inside, because if I come inside, they will pull me forward as if I am a VIP. But I know that I am not a VIP. I am not invited. I stayed out of the temple up to all rituals, everything is finished. Only then I went inside and came out directly. So I feel this is, people don't understand what is being HIV and how it can be hurted, how it can be hurtful to be treated like this. And a positive dignity, I can say this is in Mauritius. I went to Mauritius. I was invited because people came to know that I'm a Hindu Swami, being HIV positive. And then I met some other people who had AIDS, and who maybe some were died by now. And I talked to them. I told them, at what level of your personality does HIV affect you? Is it your body, your mind, or spiritual level? Because in Hinduism, we can divide one personality like this. Is it, of course, at the physical body? I told them, so 2 levels of your personality doesn't have HIV. Your mind doesn't have HIV. Your spiritual dimension doesn't have HIV. So when I told them like this, I could see a light on their face. And I understood that I could reach my goal.
Thank you, sir. JP, we've already heard from Fagmeda in South Africa, Cape Town. You're from Johannesburg. You're from the Anglican tradition. Again, reach into those experiences, the pluses and the minuses of what your faith has done.
As I've been sitting here, I've been trying to think through dignity denied, and I thank God that I can think more now of times when dignity has been supplied than when it's been denied. But I think the most recent time that I've seen dignity denied was recently in a workshop in Zambia. And we were working with a group of Christian religious leaders to speak about sex, sexuality, and gender. And the messages around homosexuality were incredibly negative and condemning. And in that meeting, a very brave man stood up and said, don't speak about they are not children of God. Don't speak about them going to hell. Tell me. And they did. With no shame, they told him, you are going to hell. You are a sinner. Just because of his sexuality. And that was a very shameful moment when dignity was denied him. In terms of dignity supplied, I can think of working with a young man who was an Anglican ordinand, and quite frankly, he was dying of HIV-related illnesses without ever having tested, for the simple reason that he knew in himself that if he tested, the church would not ordain him. And so he stopped himself from being tested simply so that nobody could say, you are HIV positive. When I got to him and found that this was the situation, I was able to write to both his own bishop and the Archbishop of Cape Town, both of whom gave strongly supportive letters saying, your HIV status will never cause you not to be denied. We affirm you as a person who would be living with HIV. And that meant that he got tested, and he got treatment, and he got life and dignity.
A remarkable story there, as they all are, on the positive side, of how faith can play a unique role in this, a crucial role in this. Pablo, you traveled across the world. Just trying to keep up with you, talking to you in the green room was phenomenal. In Buenos Aires, Amsterdam, Mexico, across all those experiences, but especially coming from a young person's perspective, an MSM perspective, and particularly a Latino perspective, and the faith that surrounds that. Dignity supplied and denied.
Well, yeah, first thinking on what dignity means a little bit, I think many people or religions or whoever can point at you or can judge you, but I think dignity is something that cannot be denied. Dignity is something that just, it's entitled to every human being, so people can make you believe that you don't have it, but it all also starts in what you think about dignity. And thinking about an example of how dignity could be denied, as working with young people living with HIV from Latin America and building the network of young people living with HIV from the region, we've been having a very great experience on how to reach young people because most of them are in communities that are strongly religiously based. That's how we can reach them, and that's exactly how we need to work with religious communities in many countries. So I think one of the examples is that, well, young people living with HIV, we are a diverse group because, yes, we are young people, but at the same time we are part of many other key populations. Young sex workers, young MSM, young transgender. So reaching those young people requires a lot of work with religious communities in Latin America. And sometimes it's how these communities say, we are not going to work with young sex workers, for example, because for us we cannot work with them for many principles that we have or values. So that's when we found that difficulty in telling them why it's important to work with these young key populations. And explicitly, I think I haven't heard of someone saying, yeah, we are not working with these people because they don't have dignity or something like that. But I think it's a lot of work of dialogue, and we don't allow to get into that point where dignity is in doubt or denied. So we're just working with dialogue about it.
Pablo, thank you. Now, you mentioned there the word principle, and I want to burrow down a bit to some bedrock here, and we could even do some theology. Okay, just a little bit.